In Wehrmacht casualty reports, there are columns for destroyed by artillery or struck by a mine. But for the crew of this German self-propelled gun, a new, terrifying category of death would have to be invented. They were not burned, nor were they shot. They were simply ground into dust, along with their vaunted Krupp steel, without a single effective shot being fired at the machine itself. A Soviet officer, a former civil engineer, saw on the battlefield what was hidden from the eyes of others. He turned the environment into a weapon of mass destruction. This is the story of how gravity and the strength of materials became allies of the Red Army. You will learn why a perfect German machine became a mass grave for its crew, and what fatal mistake the enemy made by choosing what seemed, at first glance, to be the most secure position. Spoiler, you cannot cheat physics, and the penalty for ignoring Newton's laws can be monstrous. 1944, June. The Belarusian offensive operation, which textbooks will call Bagration, looked on maps like a rushing stream of red arrows ripping through the German defense. But maps lie. Maps do not smell of burnt diesel and the sickly sweet stench of charred flesh. Here, on a narrow embankment amidst impassable swamps, grand strategy crashed against brutal tactical reality. Operational space turned into a bottleneck plugged by a single cork, and this cork was made of high-quality Krupp steel. 88 millimeters. That is the diameter of death on this sector of the front. The German Jagdpanther self-propelled gun. It is not a tank. It is a predator, stripped of a turret for the sake of a low silhouette and the monstrous PaK-43 cannon. It stands 1.5 kilometers ahead, hidden in the ruins of a brick factory workshop, methodically turning Soviet equipment into scrap metal. The distance is operational for it. For us, it is fatal. At this range, its frontal armor, positioned at rational angles of inclination, is invulnerable to our 85 millimeters. It is simple physics. The kinetic energy of our shell is insufficient to overcome the yield point of German steel at such a range. We are targets in a shooting gallery to it. It is a concrete wall to us. 2 T-34 hulls are already smoking on the road. Black, greasy smoke clings low, mixing with the swamp fog. The first tank took a hit under the turret. The detonation of the ammunition rack tore off the 5-ton structure and tossed it onto the roadside like a lid from a pot. The second tank, following behind, tried to drive off the embankment to get out of the sector of fire, but its tracks lost traction in the viscous soil. It stalled broadside. A perfect target. The second shot from the Jagdpanther stitched through the side, turning the crew into an organic mush mixed with red-hot armor fragments. No screams, no moans, only the crackle of burning oil and the muffled explosions of cartridges cooking off inside. The infantry went to ground. Men pressed themselves into the liquid mud of the embankment, trying to become flat, two-dimensional. Enemy mortars are working the grid squares, not letting anyone raise their head. Shrapnel shears bushes and human bodies with equal indifference. The air trembles from explosions, but cutting through this roar is another sound, the dry, whipping crack of the German gun. Every such crack means that another armor-piercing shell weighing 10 kilograms has broken the sound barrier and is seeking its target. Psychology retreats here. Only animal instinct remains. Dig in, disappear, dissolve into the ground. Inside the headset, there is nothing but static and cursing. The battalion commander, a major who cannot be seen behind the smoke, is screaming over the airwaves so loud the membranes can barely take it. He has orders. Take the height by 1200 hours. He has a schedule approved by headquarters. He has a court-martial breathing down his neck. He demands an attack. He demands the remaining machines be thrown forward, hoping that at least one will slip through, At least one will get to effective firing range, to 500 to 400 meters. He is an infantryman. He does not understand that tank combat is not a cavalry charge. It is an equation with many variables, where muzzle velocity and armor thickness are more important than morale. To send tanks head-on right now is not heroism. It is the disposal of expensive equipment and trained crews. It is wastefulness, paid for in war with blood, not money. Lieutenant Sokolov sits in the commander's cupola of his T-34-85. The hatch is cracked open just enough to provide ventilation, but not admit shrapnel. He is not screaming. He is not panicking. His face, covered in a layer of soot and road dust, looks like a mask.
He hears the battalion commander's hysteria, but his brain is working in a different mode. He is an engineer. Before the war, he calculated bridge trusses and beam loads. Now he calculates the probability of death. He sees the situation not as a tragedy, but as a problem in strength of materials that currently has no solution. The conditions of the problem are rigid: a narrow road, swamp on the sides, and ahead, a pillbox on tracks that sees right through them. Inside the tank, it smells of sweat, diesel, and the sour scent of fear radiating from the loader. The kid is only 19. He looks at the gun breech as if it were an icon. The gunner, hunched over, is glued to the sight, but his hands are trembling. They all saw what happened to the lead vehicle. They know. The armor of their 34 is 45 millimeters. Even sloped, it cannot take a hit from an 88. One hit, and they turn into a torch. Sokolov knows this better than anyone. He knows the German gunner is turning his hand wheels right now, choosing the next victim. He feels that gaze through the optics, cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel.
"Fourth, why are you stopped?"
The major's voice in the headset breaks into a squeal.
"Forward! I'll court-martial you. I'll have you shot in front of the formation."
Sokolov slowly exhales through clenched teeth. His hand lies on the intercom switch, but he doesn't press the button. Answering is pointless. There is no time to explain that a frontal attack is guaranteed death. The major sees a map. Sokolov sees an aperture of death. Between them lies a chasm of misunderstanding that can only be filled with burning tanks. Ahead, in the gray haze, amidst a pile of concrete and rebar, the predatory silhouette of the Jagdpanther can barely be made out. It is not shooting. It is waiting. It is saving ammunition, knowing the Russians aren't going anywhere from this single road. This waiting is scarier than the cannonade. It is the silence of the scaffold before the axe falls. The lieutenant shifts his gaze to the instruments. Oil temperature is normal. Engine RP, M, idle. The diesel purrs steadily, vibrating through the entire 12-cylinder hull. 32 tons of steel subordinated to his will. A powerful tool, but any tool is useless if used incorrectly. Hammering nails with a microscope is foolish. Trying to penetrate the front of a Jagdpanther with a standard armor-piercing shell from 1.5 kilometers is criminal. A different approach is needed. He needs to find a variable the German commander failed to account for. Sokolov looks through the periscope not as a soldier looking for an enemy, but as a builder evaluating a structure. The workshop ruins. It is a former reinforced concrete products plant. The German self-propelled gun stands deep inside, using debris walls as extra shielding. Massive overhang looms above it, the remains of the second-floor slab. A huge concrete slab held up by a prayer and rusty rebar. The Germans are smart. They chose the perfect position. The sector of fire covers the road, the flanks are protected by walls. Overhead, a roof against aircraft and plunging mortar fire. A fortress. But every fortress has an architect, and every material has a limit to its strength. Concrete gets tired too. Sokolov tears his gaze away from the periscope. His eyes narrow. In his head, instead of panic-stricken thoughts of death, force vectors begin to align. The weight of the slab, the angle of support, the thickness of the load-bearing column. If you can't punch through the armor, maybe you shouldn't hit the tank? The field manuals contain no paragraph on fighting architectural forms. Gunnery instructions don't write about calculating structural collapse. But war is not a manual. War is chaos that must be ordered by any available means. And if physics works against us in a head-on shootout, then we must force gravity to work for us. "Driver, kill the engine," Sokolov commands abruptly. Bewildered silence hangs in the headsets. The crew was waiting for forward or reverse. The command, "kill the engine," in the heat of battle sounds like the raving of a madman. "Kill it, I said!" The lieutenant's voice is as hard as the metal of a breech block. "And listen to my command. We are not going into the attack. We are going to solve a problem." The engine sneezed and went silent. The vibration vanished. Now one could hear shrapnel ticking against the armor like hail on a tin roof. Sokolov opens his map case. Dirty fingers with grease ingrained under the nails grip a pencil. On a sheet of paper, over topographic symbols, the first lines appear. Not tactics, geometry. The angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. Mass times the acceleration of gravity. It is madness. It is the only chance. The tank is no longer a fighting machine. Right now, it is simply a stationary artillery point, and its crew are demolition engineers who have 85 millimeters of steel and explosives instead of dynamite. "Loader," Sokolov's voice becomes quiet, almost mundane. "Load high explosive fragmentation." "Comrade Lieutenant, against tanks we use armor piercing," the gunner began timidly. "Belay that talk. High explosive. Fuse set to delay. We aren't going to shoot at the tank. We're going to shoot at what's holding it." The silence in the tank became dense, tangible. Outside, hell continued. But here, inside, time slowed down, obeying the rhythm of one man's thought. Sokolov looked at his watch. The second hand chopped time into equal portions. They had, maybe, 5 minutes until the Germans decided to finish off the stationary target. 5 minutes to recalculate the laws of physics in their favor. The map case rested on his knees. The pencil touched the paper. Calculation began. Data is insufficient. Engineering calculation does not tolerate approximation, and the commander's cupola periscope gives a distorted picture. Through the cloudy, bullet-scratched glass, the world breaks into fragments. Sokolov sees the target, but he doesn't see its vulnerability. He needs angles. He needs an assessment of the integrity of the load-bearing structures. He needs a full panorama of this architectural cemetery. Sitting inside 30 tons of steel is safe, but useless. To solve the problem, the viewpoint must be changed. The lieutenant tosses the pencil aside. Decision made. This isn't a burst of bravery. It is an operational necessity. "I'm going out. Keep your heads down. Wait for my command." The voice on the intercom sounds dry, like the crackle of static electricity. The hatch flips back with a heavy clang. The roar bursts into the turret, a noise the armor had previously muffled to a bearable hum. Now war sounds at full volume. The scream of ricochets, the thumping of explosions, the whistle of shrapnel. Sokolov squeezes himself out of the hatch, sliding down the sloped armor of the turret into the liquid mud of the embankment. Here, down below, the world smells not of diesel, but of damp earth, and the decomposed organic matter of swamps. He presses his whole body to the ground. Now he is not a tank platoon commander. Now he is an infantryman whose life depends on the height of his profile. The lower, the longer you live. He crawls forward, working his elbows and knees. Mud clogs his sleeves, chills his stomach. Overhead, at a height of half a meter, the air is stitched with trajectories. If he lifts his head just a bit higher, a machine gun burst will shear off his skull like a milling cutter. But there is no fear. There is extreme concentration. Sokolov counts the meters. He needs to get to the crater from a 105mm shell, located 30 meters ahead. From there, from the edge of the jagged wound in the earth, a view of the workshop facade opens up. 30 meters is an eternity. Every movement is calculated. He rolls over a fallen tree, feeling the ground vibrate with his back from a close explosion. A piece of shrapnel hisses into the mud 5 centimeters from his face. The metal is hot. Steam rises from it. Sokolov doesn't even blink. It's just ballistics. The shell has already exploded. The fragment has already lost its kinetic energy. Danger comes only from what is still flying. He rolls into the crater. Here he can catch his breath and take out his binoculars. He wipes the lenses with a finger. The lieutenant carefully, millimeter by millimeter, raises the eyepieces above the parapet. The image jerks, then snaps into focus. There she is, the Jagdpanther. Through the optics, she looks enormous. A predatory, squat beast lurking in the shadows. But Sokolov is not looking at the German machine. He is looking at what surrounds it. An ordinary soldier sees ruins. An engineer sees a load diagram. The German self-propelled gun has driven itself into a concrete sack. It stands under the remnants of the second-floor slab between 2 surviving columns. Hanging overhead is a reinforced concrete slab, huge, weighing at least 15 tons. Sokolov begins the analysis. He sees cracks running along the left support. The concrete there has crumbled, exposing rusty rebar. The rebar is working in tension, but the concrete in the compression zone has already been destroyed by previous shelling. The structure is in a state of unstable equilibrium. It is a classic failure mode waiting to happen. The slab is held up by a prayer and friction. The German commander feels safe under this overhang. He is covered from 1L2 attack aircraft, but he doesn't understand that he is sitting in a mousetrap, the spring of which is already cocked. The engineer's gaze glides over the details. The angle of the slab's inclination is about 10 degrees. If the support is knocked out, the gravity vector will direct the entire mass vertically down, with a slight shift toward the rear of the self-propelled gun. Drop height, 4 meters. The potential energy of this mass is colossal. The impact of a 15-ton slab from a height of 4 meters is equivalent to a direct hit by a large-caliber aerial bomb. The armor of the Jagdpanther is designed for point impacts from kinetic munitions, but it is not designed for a distributed load of such magnitude. The roof of the German's casemate is thin, only 16 millimeters. It won't hold. It will fold like a cardboard box. Sokolov lowers the binoculars. The plan is ready. This is no longer a fight. This is a controlled demolition of a building using an .85 caliber as the tool. He turns around and crawls back. The return journey seems faster. Adrenaline from the found solution spurs his muscles on. He knows what to do. The equation has balanced. There are no more unknowns. A dash, and he is back on the armor. His body slides into the hatch. The heavy lid slams shut, cutting off the noise of war. Inside the tank is relative silence, broken only by the breathing of the crew. The gunner and loader look at the commander with hope and fear. They see his dirty face, his burning eyes. They are waiting for an order to retreat or die. But Sokolov does something they do not expect at all. He takes out his map case. Over the map, scribbled with notes, he places a sheet of gray wrapping paper. With dirty fingers trembling from tension, he begins to draw. It is not a tactical attack scheme. It is a sketch. 2 vertical lines, columns, a horizontal, the slab, force vectors, an X at the stress point.
Look here, Sergeant. Sokolov pokes a finger at the drawing, addressing the gunner. Forget about the tank. There is no tank. There is a support. See it? The gunner, blinking, looks at the scribbles. I see it, Comrade Lieutenant. The post? Not a post. A load-bearing column. Reinforced concrete. Section 40 by 40. Reinforced armoring. Right now, it's holding this monster. He circles the slab with a thick line. Our task is not to penetrate the German. Our task is to cut this column. The crew is silent. They exchange glances. The loader, a simple country boy, opens his mouth. In his eyes, one can read the thought that the commander is shell-shocked. Shoot at posts when the best anti-tank machine of the Wehrmacht is aiming at you? This contradicts everything they were taught in training. A tank must shoot at a tank. Armor-piercing, center mass. Comrade Lieutenant, the loader begins. But it's stone. It'll ricochet. And the German... He'll see us as soon as we twitch. He'll see us, Sokolov nods, continuing to draw angles of incidence for the shell against concrete. He'll definitely see us. We'll have time for only 2, maximum 3 shots. The first, ranging, high explosive, into the ceiling, to kick up dust, blind his optics. The second, armor-piercing, into the base of the column, specifically into the base, where the concrete has already cracked. The rebar is exposed there. If we cut the rods, gravity will do the rest. He raises his eyes to the crew. His gaze is hard, cold. No madness, only calculation. This isn't a request, soldiers. This is physics. Either we bring this workshop down on him, or he burns us and the whole battalion on this road. There are no other options. Sokolov wipes the dirt from his face, leaving black streaks. Driver, start her up. Crawl out half a hull. Gunner, range 500. Target, left support of the overhang. Lead, 0. Listen to my corrections. We work like we're on a construction site. Precise and fast. The engine roared, spewing a cloud of blue smoke. The tank shuddered, coming alive. Intellect had finished its work. Now began the work of reflexes and mechanics. But at the foundation of every movement of the levers, every turn of the handwheel, lay not a blind order, but a precise engineering schematic drawn with a dirty finger on a scrap of paper. Tracks bite into the water-saturated clay. 32 tons of steel begin to move. This is not a cavalry dash. It is the heavy, strained labor of mechanisms working at their limit. The V234 diesel roars at 2,000 RPM, throwing a pillar of black soot into the sky. The driver engages the clutch, and the tank, shuddering with its whole frame, crawls out from behind cover. We are stepping into the light. We are stepping into the death zone. The distance shrinks. 500 meters. 480. In the gunner's sight, the world narrows to the crosshairs. The sector of view is limited, but even in this narrow corridor, the main thing is visible. The Jagdpanther is no longer asleep. The predator has sensed movement. The long barrel of the Pak-43, looking like a telegraph pole, begins to slowly, almost lazily, turn in our direction. It is terrifying geometry. The traverse speed of the German gun is low, but it doesn't need to spin like a top. It is enough to traverse the hull 3 degrees. The math here is simple and ruthless. If the muzzle of the .88 caliber aligns with the axis of our tank before we fire, we are corpses. The flight time of the German shell at this distance is less than half a second. We won't even hear the sound of the shot. We will simply cease to exist. "Traverse left! Shortstop!" Sokolov yells, drowning out the engine roar. The tank jerks and freezes. We are standing in the open. The whole armor, those pitiful 45 millimeters, seems like paper right now. We are a target on a range. The German gunner sees us full length right now. He sees our fuel tanks on the sides. He sees the driver's hatch. He has already put his hand on the trigger. "High explosive! Into the overhang!" The lieutenant's command whips through the ears via the intercom. The gunner freezes. A second of confusion that could cost the lives of the entire crew. His hands, trained by years of drills, reflexively reach for the hand wheels to lay the mark on the enemy's frontal armor. It is instinct. See a tank? Hit the tank. The manual states, "For engaging armored targets, use armor-piercing tracers." Shooting HE at a 70-ton monster is absurd. It's like throwing stones at a locomotive. A high-explosive shell weighing 9.5 kilograms will simply splash metal against Krupp cemented steel. "Into the ceiling, I said! Higher!" Sokolov's voice breaks into a roar. He sees the doubt in the gunner's back. He understands. Breaking the manual under the muzzle of a German gun is scarier than attacking. "Not at the armor! At the concrete! Blind him!" Inside the turret, the stale air thickens with tension. The loader, breathing heavily, shoves an O-365 fragmentation grenade into the breach. The clang of the wedge breech block sounds like a sentence. There is no heroism in this sound, only metallic inevitability. Loaded. The gunner, with effort, overcoming the trembling in his fingers, turns the elevation wheel. The crosshair crawls up. From the armored forehead of the German self-propelled gun, from its gun mantlet, higher, into the gray, pitted darkness under the workshop vault, to where the concrete slab hangs. It is unnatural. It contradicts all logic of tank combat, but there is no time for arguments. The black pupil of the German cannon is almost looking them in the face. "Fire!" The tank jumps on its suspension. 85 millimeters of fury burst from the barrel. The recoil slams into the stop. The casing falls to the combat compartment floor with a hollow ring, adding the acrid, sour aroma of burnt gunpowder to the smell of diesel. The shell leaves at a speed of 792 meters per second. It isn't just a piece of metal. It is a carrier of kinetic energy multiplied by 700 grams of explosives. Sokolov doesn't blink. He looks through the periscope, drilling his gaze into the point of impact. Impact. The shell doesn't reach the German armor. It slams into the lower edge of the concrete vault, directly above the Jagdpanther's casemate. The instantaneous fuse triggers as designed. Flash. A roar that can be heard even through the armor. It isn't a penetration. It is a sledgehammer blow to plaster. The blast wave and steel fragments bite into the old, tired concrete. But the main thing isn't the fragments. The main thing is the dust. Years of compressed cement dust, brick crumbs, chunks of lime, all of this instantly turns into a dense, impenetrable cloud. It covers the German gun in a gray shroud. Gravity pulls this debris down. An avalanche of fine rubble and concrete grit crashes onto the top of the German machine, burying the periscopes, clogging the vision slits, covering the optics. The German is blind. The Jagdpanther fires blindly. The barrel jerks, spitting a tongue of flame. The shell passes above the turret of the T-34, cutting the air with a horrific howl. The vacuum shock from the passing slug hits the ears even through the helmet. Behind them, 50 meters away, an old pine tree explodes, turning into splinters. If they had fired half a second earlier, those splinters would have been us. Silence on the airwaves, broken only by the heavy breathing of the crew. The plan worked. Physics worked. The German gunner now sees not a Russian tank, but a gray haze. He needs time. He needs to wipe the optics. He needs the dust to settle. He is panicking. The German machine, a perfect killer, turned out to be helpless against dirt and debris. But this is only the beginning. We bought seconds, not the battle. The dust will settle. The enemy hasn't gone anywhere. His armor is intact. His gun is loaded. We just set up a smoke screen, only, instead of smoke, concrete. "Load armor-piercing," commands Sokolov. His voice has become dry and hard as sandpaper. "Correction. Left 2, down 0.5. Target, the support. The load-bearing column." The loader is already pulling a heavy unitary cartridge with a blunt-nosed slug from the rack. His hands are oily. Sweat pours into his eyes. He works like an automaton, but his look has changed. He saw that the commander's madness produced a result. We are alive. Sokolov looks at his watch. Only 12 seconds have passed since the duel began. 12 seconds in which they managed to be born again.
Now the real work begins. Now they need not to scare, but to break. Before him is no longer an enemy tank. Before him is a structure that needs to be dismantled. And in his hands is the world's best demolition tool. A steel slug weighing 9 kilograms, 200 grams, accelerated to supersonic speed. The tank shudders again, breeches clang. Sokolov mentally traces the trajectory. Angle of impact, 90 degrees. Distance, lethal. Concrete strength versus steel strength. Now we will test these German walls for compression. "Ready!" screams the loader. "Fire!" Sokolov exhales. The second act of the engineering drama begins. Impact. The world inside the tank collapses into a single, blinding spark. Sound disappears, displaced by a monstrous, vibrating ring that penetrates not through the ears, but straight through the skull bones. It is not a penetration. It is a ricochet. The German shell, fired blindly through the cloud of concrete dust, glanced off the cheek of the turret, a glancing hit. If the angle of impact had been 2 degrees less, the 88mm slug would have entered the combat compartment, turning the crew into mince. But physics played for us this time. The shell went into the sky, leaving a glowing furrow on the armor the depth of a palm, and the smell of burnt metal, sharp as the crack of a whip. Sokolov shakes his head. A thin stream of blood runs from his nose. Capillaries burst from the pressure change. There is a cottony roar in his ears, through which the engine roar barely breaks. No fear. No time for fear. Only a cold logging of facts. The German is alive. The German is dangerous. The German is finding his range. We have seconds before he wipes his optics, or the wind blows the curtain away. "Report!" The lieutenant's voice sounds hollow, as if from a barrel. "Alive!" the gunner wheezes. He is gripping the hand wheels with white-knuckled fingers.
He is shaking, but it isn't panic. It is the vibration of overstrained nerves. Sokolov presses against the periscope. The dust is slowly settling. Through the gray haze, the outline of the target emerges. Not the tank. The tank right now is just scenery. The target is the left support of the overhang, a reinforced concrete column, already damaged by time and artillery. Right now, it is Atlas, holding up the sky on its shoulders. and this sky weighs 15 tons.
Armor piercing,
commands Sokolov. He isn't shouting. He is dictating the conditions of the problem.
Target, base of the column, ground level, where the rebar comes out of the foundation.
Armor piercing up, the loader responds. Inside the tank, heavy, rhythmic work begins. There is no room for beautiful gestures here. This is a factory workshop producing death. The loader, a big guy with a broad back, works like a piston. He snatches a 16-kilogram round from the rack. Heavy, cold metal slides in oiled hands.
Turn of the body, shove. The shell enters the breech with a clang. The loader's fist punches the shell, ramming it into the chamber. The breech wedge rises with a predatory click, locking the barrel. Ready? Fire! The tank shudders. The recoil slams back with force, ejecting the smoking casing. It falls to the floor with a metallic ring, rolling underfoot. Acrid smoke from burnt gunpowder clogs the lungs, tears at the throat. The fan on the turret roof hums, trying to draw out the fumes, but can't keep up. In the periscope, Sokolov sees the result. The shell hits exactly at the base of the column. There is no flash. The slug is solid, no explosives. There is only the impact of kinetic energy. Spalls fly from the concrete. A chunk of the column the size of a human head simply vanishes, turning into rubble. The skeleton of the building is exposed. Rusty, twisted rebar rods the thickness of a finger. They tremble from the blow. Scale flakes off them. The column held.
Concrete is a material strong in compression. It holds the load. But we aren't planning to compress it. We plan to shear it.
Short, Sokolov states dryly. Up 0.5 meter. Hit the joint.
We need to crumble the concrete, leave only the iron. The iron will bend under the load.
Got it, Commander. Up 1/2 turn. Tempo, work. Don't let him recover.
This is a duel not with the Jagdpanther. This is a duel with the resistance of materials. The German crew is probably thrashing around inside their steel box right now, trying to understand why the Russians are missing. They hear impacts on the workshop walls, hear the crash of collapses, but don't understand the intent. They are waiting for a hit to the front, preparing to accept death with dignity, face to face. But death is coming from the side, in the form of a methodical dismantling of their cover.
Fire!
Second shot. Again the blow, again the ring of the casing, again the cloud of smoke. The shell slams into the same spot, just above the first hit. The concrete gives way. A huge slab falls off the column, exposing the rebar cage for 1/2 meter. Now one can see the rods beginning to curve barely noticeably. The enormous mass of the slab overhead presses down. Before, the load was distributed across the entire cross-section of the concrete. Now, the entire weight rests on a dozen steel rods. They are working at their yield point. Sokolov sees this. He is an engineer. He feels the tension of the metal the way a doctor feels a pulse.
Again, he growls. Again in the same spot. Finish it. Tear the rebar.
The loader is wheezing now. Sweat pours into his eyes, stings his skin. Hands slide on the casings. Movements become jerky, but the tempo doesn't drop. It is a conveyor belt. Grab, turn, ram. Grab, turn, ram. Every 8 seconds, a shot. Every 8 seconds, 9 kilograms of steel fly into the concrete. The German snaps back. Through the settling dust, the Jagdpanther fires a return salvo. The shell passes to the right, tearing the air. The shockwave hits the hull of the 34 like a hammer. The tank rocks. Somewhere outside, a spare parts box is torn off and flies away with a clang.
Don't care! yells Sokolov, seeing the gunner instinctively hunch his head into his shoulders. "Don't look at him! Look at the support! We won't outshoot him, we'll bury him! Fire!" The third shell hits the mangled column. The sound of the impact is different. It isn't a dull thud against stone. It is the sharp, screeching grind of metal on metal. The slug severs one of the load-bearing rebar rods, a shower of sparks. The column shuddered. It is visible to the naked eye how hairline cracks run along the entire length of the support. The slab above shifted. Dust and small stones rained down from it, pattering on the armor of the German self-propelled gun. The structure has lost its static equilibrium.
Now it is held up by the dynamics of destruction. The process has started.
Inside the tank, the heat is like a blast furnace. The ventilation pushes hot air around. The tunic on Sokolov's back has turned black with sweat. He doesn't tear himself away from the observation device. He sees the Jagdpanther begin to move. The German commander has finally understood. He understood that the roof over his head is not protection, but a sentence. The tracks of the German machine begin to spin, grinding brick dust. He tries to reverse, to get out from under the overhang. "He's leaving!" screams the gunner. "He won't leave." Sokolov's voice rings with tension. "Load! The last one! Into the knot! Break it completely!" There is no more time for calculations. There is only intuition and brute force. The German machine, engine roaring, crawls backward, trying to save itself from the stone trap. The column, bent into an arc, groans. The rebar rings, snapping one by one. It needs a final push. The final argument of the .85 caliber. The loader, growling with exertion, rams the shell home. The breech clicks. "Ready!" Sokolov closes his eyes for a second, visualizing the force vector. "Hit it!" The shot merges with the beat of his heart. The tank jumps back. In the periscope, a flash of sparks where the column was. The shell hits exactly into the bend of the rebar, knocking out the last remaining rods. The support disappears in a cloud of concrete dust. For a split second, silence hangs. It seems nothing happened. The slab hangs in the air, violating all laws of gravity. But this is just an illusion of vision. Physics cannot be cheated. The fulcrum is destroyed. The balance is broken. Gravity, the great and merciless force, claims its rights. At first, nothing happens. Split seconds that seem like hours. The left support, sheared at the base by the armor-piercing shell, disappears. But the massive reinforced concrete slab, weighing 15 tons, still hangs in the air. This is the moment of visual deception, when the inertia of rest fights the inevitability of the fall. The rebar deep in the concrete groans. This sound, a low, guttural grinding, is audible even through the roar of engines. It is the sound of a dying structure. Then, physics takes over. The edge of the slab shudders and goes down. Slowly, reluctantly, as if in a dream. But this slowness is deceptive. The acceleration of freefall, 9.8 meters per second squared, begins its work. Gravity, the oldest and most ruthless force in the universe, enters the battle on the side of the Red Army. It needs no gunpowder or primers. It needs only mass and height. And there is plenty of both here. The driver of the Jagdpanther sees it. Through his vision port, he sees not an enemy, but the sky falling. He does the only thing a man in an iron box can do. He floors the gas pedal.
The Maybach engine roars, spewing clouds of blue smoke.
The tracks spin backward at frantic speed, striking sparks from the stones. The steel behemoth, weighing 45 tons, jerks, trying to tear itself out of the trap. Too late. The calculation of time proved more precise than the calculation of maneuver. The slab crashes down. It is not an explosion. An explosion is an instantaneous flash, gas expansion, a shock wave. Everything is different here. It is the dull, heavy, all-crushing blow of a hammer on an anvil. The concrete monolith strikes the Jagdpanther flat, shifting slightly toward the rear of the casemate. The impact hits the weakest spot, the roof of the combat compartment. 16 millimeters of armor. That is protection against shrapnel, against machine gun bursts, maybe against light mortar rounds. But it is not protection against a falling building. The sound of the impact is terrible. It is a crunch, a loud, dry crunch of breaking steel, mixed with the rumble of crumbling stone. The tank isn't just flattened, it is driven into the earth. Suspension, torsion bars, road wheels, all of it instantly collapses, bursts, shoots out springs and bolts to the sides. The belly of the machine sits on the ground, forcing fountains of mud out from under it. The long barrel of the Pak-43, the pride of German engineering, jerks downward, plows the earth, and bends like aluminum wire. The muzzle brake buries itself in broken brick. The predatory silhouette of the tank destroyer disappears. Instead of a menacing war machine, only a flattened, deformed pile of metal remains under a mound of debris. Silence falls instantly. The German's engine has stalled. It wasn't turned off. It was strangled. The fallen slab cut off the air intakes, crushed the exhaust pipes, crushed the engine compartment. The heart of the machine stopped. No more clanking tracks, no whining transmission, no threatening turret turn. There is only a cloud of thick, gray cement dust that slowly, lazily spreads in all directions, shrouding the place of execution. Inside the T-34, no one yells, "Hurrah!" The crew sits, stunned by the spectacle. The gunner tears himself away from the sight, his eyes wide. He has seen tanks burn. He has seen turrets fly off from ammo detonations. But he has never seen a tank turn into a tin can under a press. This sight is unnatural for a tanker. It evokes not joy, but stupefaction. A cold chill runs down the spine. Sokolov looks through the periscope. His face is stone. No emotions, only analysis of the result. The problem is solved. The equation balanced. The unknown variable, Jagdpanther, has been eliminated from the battle formula by method of physical exclusion. "Driver, kill the engine," he says quietly. The engine of the Soviet tank goes quiet. Now one can hear the dust settling, the whisper of sand on armor. Small pebbles tap against the hull. Somewhere in the ruins, a piece of rebar falls with a light ring. And nothing else. Not a sound from under the slab. Absolute, dead silence. This piece is scarier than the roar of cannonade. There, under tons of concrete, is the crew. 5 men, German soldiers, enemies. A second ago, they were a deadly threat, the top of the food chain in this war. Now they are gone. And their death was not heroic in a shootout, but gruesome, instantaneous, and hopeless. They were crushed by their own cover. The engineering error of their commander, who chose this position, cost them their lives. Sokolov's engineering calculation carried out the sentence. "Done," the loader exhales. He wipes his hands with a rag, and this mundane gesture seems inappropriate right now. Flat as a pancake, like a toad by a steamroller. Sokolov doesn't answer. He opens the hatch. Fresh air, albeit smelling of burning, rushes into the turret. The lieutenant leans out. The dust is settled enough to see details. The picture is impressive in its monumentality. The ruins of the workshop have changed geometry. Where there was an arch and shadow, there is now a pile of debris. And sticking out from under this pile, like a broken arm, is the bent barrel of the German gun. It is a monument to the victory of mind over force. The brute power of the .88 caliber, thick frontal armor, cemented steel, all proved useless against Newton's laws. Sokolov looks at his handiwork not as a killer, but as a builder who conducted a complex demolition of a condemned structure. It's just that this time, the object of demolition was the enemy. He takes out a cigarette, mashes the cardboard tip with dirty fingers. His hands aren't shaking. The trembling left with the last shot. Now fatigue has arrived. Heavy, leaden fatigue piling onto his shoulders. His brain, working for the last 10 minutes in afterburner mode, demands rest.
Comrade Lieutenant, the gunner's voice sounds uncertain.
What if it hadn't fallen? What if the rebar held? Sokolov strikes a match. The flame flares up, illuminating his face smeared with soot and oil. He takes a deep drag, holds the smoke in his lungs, then slowly exhales a stream toward the defeated enemy. Concrete always gets tired, he says quietly. And iron has a yield point of 2,400 kilograms per square centimeter. I knew the steel grade. I knew the load. There are no miracles, Sergeant. There is only strength of materials. He looks at the road. The way is clear. The cork has been popped. The battalion, frozen in the mud, begins to come alive. The first commands, the clatter of bolts, the rumble of truck engines are heard. The war continues. But for the crew of one Jagdpanther, it ended under the debris of a Soviet factory. Sokolov lowers himself back into the hatch. "Start her up," he commands.
We have a schedule. The tank comes alive. The diesel begins its rhythmic run again. Tracks turn, throwing off clumps of clay. The T-34 drives around the pile of concrete that has become a grave, not touching it. The machine goes forward, leaving behind the destroyed workshop and the crushed beast. Ahead are hundreds more kilometers of war, thousands more problems that will require solutions. But none of the crew will ever forget this physics lesson. The road is open. What 5 minutes ago was a deadly dead end, a bottleneck where the battalion was supposed to bleed out, has again become an operational line. The obstacle is removed, not by magic, not by a miracle, but by a precisely applied force vector. The engine of the T-34 roared, gathering revs. Exhaust pipes threw clouds of black smoke into the damp air. This sound served as a signal. The swamp, which seemed dead, began to come alive. Gray, shapeless hummocks covered in mud suddenly stirred, rising from the mire. Infantry. Men pressed into the earth by mortar fire and fear of the invulnerable machine straightened their backs. Hundreds of figures in soaked greatcoats rose from the mud. At first slowly, distrustfully, glancing back at the workshop ruins. Then, faster, more confidently. They saw. The barrel that held them at gunpoint now looks into the ground like a broken branch. They heard. The German motor is silent. "Forward!" The command rang out over the embankment, picked up by dozens of voices. A living wave surged onto the road. It didn't look like a parade march. It was the heavy, raspy movement of tired people who had just looked death in the eye and watched it blink. Boots squelched in the clay, kneading the sludge mixed with oil and soot. Soldiers ran past Sokolov's tank, flowing around it on both sides like water flows around a breakwater.
The lieutenant leaned out of the hatch again.
He needed to assess the situation, check the tracks, inspect the vision devices. But he looked at the people. They ran past, gasping from the run and adrenaline. Faces gray, earthen, with sunken eyes. Many have grit grinding in their teeth. But in those eyes there was no longer that animal terror that pinned them to the bottom of the swamp. Now there was the angry, determined cheerfulness of survivors. Someone running by, coming level with the turret, swung his rifle butt against the armor. "Thanks, buddy!" A hoarse shout, a voice blown out. "Go on, grease monkey, punch it!" "Cleaned the Fritz's clock! Cleaned it beautifully!" The blows of rifle butts on armor sounded like a disorderly drum roll. Thump. Thump thump. Thump. It wasn't a violation of subordination. It was the only available language of gratitude amidst the roar. Hard wood of the stock against the hard steel of the turret. The sound of trust. The infantry thanked not for heroism, they thanked for professionalism. For the fact that the tankers didn't burn senselessly, but did their job, opening a passage. Sokolov looked at them from above. He didn't smile. His face remained a mask molded from tension and soot. Inside his head, accustomed to operating with numbers, a counter automatically switched on. 1, 2, 10, 50. Platoon after platoon, company after company. 200 people. Roughly that many just ran past his machine. 200 units of personnel, 200 rifles, 200 lives. If he had gone head-on, as the manual required and the battalion commander screamed, the Jagdpanther would have burned him in 3 seconds. And then it would have started on the infantry. 88mm high-explosive shells would have turned this embankment into a mass grave. These people who are running now, banging on the armor and cursing, would be dead. Their bodies would lie in this mud, torn to shreds. 200 people. That is the price of an engineering calculation. That is the true efficiency of his brain. Not penetrated armor, not burning enemy metal, but this living mass that continues to function, shoot, and advance. The column slowed down at the workshop ruins. Soldiers slowed their pace, passing the execution site of the German self-propelled gun. The sight mesmerized even seasoned frontline soldiers. A massive concrete slab lay on the ground, pinning the steel monster. Only road wheels and shreds of tracks stuck out from under the concrete. The armor, which seemed indestructible, was flattened like a tin can hit by a sledgehammer. "Look, Semenich," the raspy voice of an infantry sergeant. "Smashed flat. You gotta hit it like that. No dynamite, purely by weight. The tanker's head works. Engineering job." Sokolov heard snatches of phrases. He looked at the Jagdpanther barrel sticking out of the rubble. Now it was just a piece of pipe. Physics defeated ideology. Gravity turned out to be stronger than Krupp steel. He felt a strange, cold satisfaction. Not the joy of killing, but the satisfaction of a master who correctly solved an extremely complex problem on the resistance of materials in extreme conditions. "Comrade Lieutenant!" A shout from below. Medics ran up to the tank. They were dragging wounded on rain capes, those who got caught by mines even before the duel started. "Give us a lift to the medical battalion, Commander. It's 3 clicks. We won't drag them through the muck." Sokolov nodded. "Load them on the transmission deck. Just be careful. Don't block the louvers. The engine overheats." The medics began lifting heavy, limp bodies onto the rear of the tank. Blood dripped onto the green paint of the armor, mixing with oil. The wounded groaned as they were laid on the hard metal. But it was warm metal. The warmth of the running diesel warmed them, knocked out the chills of blood loss. The tank, created for killing, turned into a sanitary transport.
The machine of death became a machine of life. Sokolov looked at the face of one of the wounded. Just a boy, face white as chalk, lips blue, shrapnel in the gut. He stared at the sky with an unseeing gaze, but he breathed. And he will live because the road is open, because the tank is driving, not burning. This logistics of life was more important to Sokolov than any medals. He preserved a combat unit, his crew. He preserved the materiel, his tank. And he preserved an infantry battalion, ensuring the completion of the combat mission. Efficiency. That is the word spinning in his head. War is a monstrously inefficient waste of resources. But today, in this specific battle, on this kilometer of the front, the efficiency was maximal. "Ready, Commander! You can move!" shouted the medic, settling down next to the wounded on the engine compartment. Sokolov pressed the intercom switch. "Driver, smoothly forward."
We have riders. We aren't hauling firewood.
The tank moved softly. Tracks clanked, engaging the drive sprockets. The machine swayed and crawled forward, past the concrete grave of the German crew, past craters, past mangled trees. The lieutenant looked back at the ruins one last time. The dust had almost settled. The pile of concrete looked like a natural part of the landscape, like a tombstone to the ambitions of Third Reich designers. They built the perfect machine for duels on the steppe, but they forgot that they would have to fight in a world where houses, gravity, and Russian engineers exist. Ahead, beyond the strip of smoke, the outlines of the next village were already visible. There would be a battle again. There would be guns, mines, and ambushes again. But this line is past. The problem is solved. Sokolov lowered himself into the hatch, closing the heavy lid behind him. Inside, it became dark and cramped again. It smelled of sweat and heated metal. He wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing the dirt. "Course 030, he said into the microphone. "Marching speed." The tank picked up speed, carrying saved lives on its armor, and carrying inside a crew that had become one battle older and one eternity wiser. The war continued, but now they knew. Even if you don't have a shell capable of piercing armor, you always have physics, and a head to apply that physics. Evening descends on the swamps like a heavy, damp blanket. The roar of battle has moved west, leaving behind a ringing silence, interrupted only by the crackle of cooling metal and distant explosions. The air here is dense, saturated with the smell of burning, unburnt diesel and wet clay. This is the smell of war that eats into pores and doesn't wash off for weeks. A staff Willys drives up to the ruins of the workshop where the Jagdpanther found its death. Tires whisper over broken brick. A colonel gets out of the car. This is not a rear echelon staff officer with clean shoulder boards. This is a man with a gray, weather-beaten face on which road dust has mixed with deep wrinkles of fatigue. His boots are in the same swamp sludge as the simple infantrymen. Regimental commander. A man responsible for thousands of lives and hundreds of units of equipment. A man function, whose job is to turn orders from above into captured kilometers of territory. He slowly walks around the site of the duel. In the twilight, the pile of concrete under which the German self-propelled gun is buried looks like an ancient burial mound. The colonel has seen many knocked-out tanks. He has seen torn-off turrets, seen hulls burnt to the ground, seen armor torn to shreds. But this does not fit into the usual picture of war. He stops in front of the gun barrel sticking out from under the slab. The huge reinforced concrete slab lies flat, as if placed by a crane.
Under it, 45 tons of German steel turned into a flat pancake. No fire, no smoke. Cold, monumental death. The colonel runs his hand along the rough edge of the concrete. He tries to understand the mechanics of what happened. In his reports, there are columns destroyed by artillery fire, blown up by mines. There is no column crushed by a building in the reports. "Lieutenant Sokolov!" The colonel's voice sounds not loud, but commanding. Sokolov separates from his tank, standing a little way off. He looks exhausted. His coveralls are black with oil and sweat. His face is a mask on which only eyes and teeth show white. He approaches with a parade step, but mortal fatigue shows in every movement. He doesn't know why he was summoned. Maybe for a reward, or maybe for a reprimand for excessive ammunition consumption and violation of instructions. In war, the line between a hero and a criminal is often thinner than cigarette paper. "Comrade Colonel, Tank Platoon Commander Lieutenant Sokolov, reporting as ordered." The colonel is silent. He looks at the lieutenant, then again at the crushed Jagdpanther. He takes out a cigarette case, clicks the lid. "Smoke?" "Yes, sir." The colonel offers a cigarette. They light up. The flame of the match illuminates the hard folds near the regimental commander's mouth for a second. "Report how you did this." The colonel nods at the pile of concrete. "My artillerymen say you fired high explosives at a tank from 500 meters. "Yes, sir, Comrade Colonel. First one, high explosive." "Combat service regulations for tank troops, section gunnery training." The colonel speaks evenly, as if reading a lecture. "For engaging armored targets, use armor-piercing, sub-caliber, or shaped charge shells. Firing high-explosive fragmentation shells is permitted only against lightly armored targets and personnel." "Did you read this?" "I read it," Sokolov inhales, looking straight into the senior officer's eyes. "But the manual doesn't say what to do when the enemy's frontal armor isn't penetrated by the standard shell, and flanking is impossible." "So you decided to go into construction?" Sarcasm slips into the colonel's voice, but his eyes remain serious. "Demolition, Comrade Colonel. Engineering demolition. I assessed the load-bearing capacity of the structures. The left support was overloaded. The slab was holding on by a limit. I just removed the extra support point." The colonel grunts. He walks to the place where the column used to stand. Now there is only concrete rubble and rebar twisted into a knot. He kicks a piece of brick with his boot. "This isn't according to the manual, Lieutenant. This is improvisation, and the army rests on discipline and uniformity. If everyone starts fighting by their own rules, we'll turn into a gang. You risked the machine. You risked the crew. You spent 4 shells to knock down a post." Sokolov is silent. He knows the colonel is right from the bureaucracy's point of view. Bureaucracy demands a report. Bureaucracy demands that the enemy's death be regulated. But he also knows another truth. "Comrade Colonel," Sokolov says quietly, "if I had acted according to the manual, we would all be lying there. Both my crew and the lead tank and the infantry that is now 3 kilometers away from here. The Jagdpanther would have cracked us like nuts. Smart people wrote the manual, but they wrote it in offices. And here, it's physics. Armor slope angle 80 millimeters, ricochet 100%. I chose the only solution that gave a chance." The colonel looks at him for a long time. In the silence, one can hear the metal of the crushed self-propelled gun cooling, a thin, plaintive ringing. This is the sound of final victory. The colonel shifts his gaze to the road. He sees the traces of hundreds of boots that passed this place, traces of living people. He understands.
Before him stands not just a daring tanker. Before him stands a professional who was able to see the battlefield not as a shooting range, but as a problem with variables. And this quality is more valuable than blind adherence to paragraphs. According to the manual, the colonel says slowly, exhaling smoke. According to the manual, I should send you to the guardhouse for violating firing rules. He pauses. Sokolov doesn't lower his eyes. But winners aren't judged, Lieutenant. Especially such winners. The colonel throws the cigarette butt into the mud and decisively steps on it with his boot. His face changes. The mask of a strict boss leaves. The face of a tired man remains, glad that today there will be one less line in the casualty summary. He extends a hand. The palm is broad, hard as a soul. Thank you for your service, son. And for your bright head. Thank you. Sokolov shakes the hand. The handshake is short, firm, masculine, without unnecessary sentimentality. It is the transfer of respect from one professional to another. I serve the Soviet Union. Take care of your head, says the colonel, heading to the car. A helmet is good, but what's under it is more important. There are a lot of fools in war, but few engineers. We still have to take Berlin. There's a lot of concrete there. There will be enough work for you. He gets into the Willys. The driver engages the gear. The car turns around, illuminating the ruins with its headlights. In the headlights' beam, the crushed Jagdpanther looks especially eerie. A monument to German pride, broken by Russian calculation. Sokolov is left alone. The conversation is over. There will be no court-martial. There will be a new battle, new tasks, new equations. But this moment, the moment of recognition of his rightness, is more important than any medal. The colonel recognized the main thing. War is not only order and execution. War is intellect. It is the ability to think faster than a shell flies. He returns to the tank. The crew is waiting. The guys saw the commander talking to himself. They saw the handshake. They don't ask questions, but they square their shoulders. If the colonel shook his hand, it means we did everything right. It means our lieutenant isn't crazy, but a genius. And with such a commander, they have a chance to live to see victory. Well, Commander? Asks the driver, wiping his hands with a rag. Did he chew you out? Praised me, Sokolov throws out briefly. Said there's a lot of concrete in Europe. Get ready, we're going to break stuff. Sokolov climbs onto the armor. The night air chills his heated skin. He looks at the stars. They are the same as in astronomy textbooks. Cold, distant, obeying the laws of celestial mechanics. Here, on Earth, the laws are the same, just the price of a mistake is higher. A mistake in bridge calculations is an accident. A mistake in battle calculations is death. Today, he didn't make a mistake. Somewhere, far away, on the horizon, flashes of artillery fire begin to flare up again. The front isn't sleeping. The huge mechanism of war continues to grind iron and people. But now Sokolov knows he is not just a cog in this mechanism. He is an operator. He can change the course of events if he uses his main caliber, intellect. Silence ends. The night before the next battle begins, and they will spend this night alive. This is the main result of his engineering calculation. Night at war comes not by the clock, but when the cannonade quiets down. The battalion stopped for the night in a sparse pine forest, camouflaging the machines with spruce branches. Engines cool, crackling with metal like beasts settling down to sleep after a hard hunt. This sound, thermal contraction of armor and cylinder steel, is the most peaceful music for a tanker. If the machine is cooling, it means it isn't burning. Fires are forbidden, but in holes dug according to regulations and covered with rain capes, coals glow. They heat canned meat, boil water. It smells of pine needles, coarse tobacco, and that special, heavy smell of unwashed bodies and oiled coveralls that distinguishes tank troops. There is no pomp here. Here reigns the domesticity of a repair shop under the open sky. Lieutenant Sokolov squats near the track of his 34. In his hands, a piece of hardtack and a mug of boiling water. He doesn't taste it. He feels the tension in his neck muscles slowly releasing. Adrenaline has burned out, leaving behind a hollow emptiness and leaden heaviness in his eyelids. People gradually gather around his machine. First, crews from neighboring tanks approach. Then, guys from the second company pull up. Rumors at the front are faster than radio communications. The news of how the platoon commander dismantled a German self-propelled gun without spending a single armor-piercing shell on penetration went through the column during the march. They don't need tall tales about heroism. They need survival technology. "So, show us, engineer," booms a mechanic from the 3rd platoon, wiping his hands with a rag. "How did you do him? They say you swatted him with a roof?" Sokolov puts the mug on a track link. He sees these faces in the reflections of the glowing coals. Young, old, burned, dirty. They look at him not as a hero, but as a bearer of sacred knowledge. They know, tomorrow or the day after, we will enter a city. And a city for a tank is a grave. In a city, distances shorten to a grenade throw. In a city, the Germans have Faustpatrons. In a city, long-barreled guns are useless in narrow alleys. They are scared. And this fear is a normal reaction of a healthy organism. Sokolov must turn this fear into calculation. He looks around for something suitable, finds a dry, straight twig, clears the top layer of pine needles with his boot, exposing gray, dense sand. This is his blackboard. This is his blueprint. Sit closer. Sokolov's voice is quiet, but in the night silence it is heard distinctly. This will be a practical talk. The tankers move into a tight ring, shoulder to shoulder. Sokolov draws a straight line in the sand. This is the armor of a panther or tiger. 80, 100, 120 millimeters, sloped. He draws a vector bouncing off the line. This is our 85 shell. At a kilometer range, we don't take it. Head on, ricochet. Gun mantlet, ricochet. We are a target for him. This is an axiom. Anyone who tries to trade shots with them head-on by the rules of a jousting tournament will burn. He pauses. Someone sighs heavily. Everyone knows this. Everyone has seen the smoking pyres on the roads. But a tank, continues Sokolov, drawing a square, is just a machine. And a machine depends on the environment in which it is located. We are entering Europe. There is a lot of stone there. The houses there are old, heavy. The lieutenant draws a schematic house next to the square. Not a child's drawing, but a diagram. Foundation, walls, floors. Look here. Any building is an equilibrium system. Walls hold the roof. Columns hold the balcony. All of this pushes down. He pokes the twig at the base of the drawn wall. In the city, the German will hide in ruins. He will expose only his front, hiding his sides behind brick. You can't reach him. But brick isn't armor steel. Sokolov traces the trajectory of a shell flight. Not at the tank, at the corner of the building. Don't hit him in the forehead. Hit the support. Corner of the house, load-bearing column, joint of the slabs. With HE. The twig sharply crosses out the drawn wall.
A high-explosive 85mm shell contains enough explosives to knock out masonry 1.5 bricks thick. If you knock out the corner, the second floor goes down. Silence stands in the circle. Only the crackling of wood is heard. The tankers absorb the information. This isn't a political briefing on morale. This is an instruction manual for reality. Second, Sokolov draws a street, a narrow corridor. Ricochet. In the city, there is asphalt, cobblestones, house walls. A shell hitting the pavement at a sharp angle doesn't bury itself in the ground like in a swamp. It slides. It ricochets. He draws a line that hits the ground in front of the tank and flies into the unprotected belly. If a tiger is standing around the corner and you don't see his turret, hit the asphalt in front of him. Shrapnel will fan upwards. They have road wheels, tracks, transmission there. Belly armor is thin. Cut the track with a ricochet. He stops.
And a stationary tank in a city is a dead tank. Infantry will burn it.
And if he's sitting in a basement? Asks a loader from a neighboring crew. Just a boy with a bandaged arm. If in a basement, bring the ceiling down on him, Sokolov answers harshly. Don't waste time looking for the embrasure. Drop the whole floor. Gravity is our best weapon. It works for free and without missing. A ton of concrete is more reliable than 100 grams of TNT. He wipes the drawing with his palm and sketches a new one. Force vectors, angles of fire. Remember the main rule of an engineer. Break where it's thin, not where it's hard. A tank is hard in front. A house is thin at the bottom. The German thinks walls protect him. Your task is to make the walls kill him. Sokolov speaks for a long time, about how to identify a load-bearing wall by eye, about how brickwork fears vibration and concrete fears a point impact on rebar, about how wood floors burn well, and sometimes it's easier to set fire to a house than to smoke out grenadiers from there. He sees the listener's eyes change. Hopelessness leaves. The excitement of professionals appears. Before, they saw the city as a labyrinth of death, where a slug could fly from every window. Now they begin to see the city as a set of structures that can and should be destroyed for the cause. Comrade Lieutenant, we had a stone church in our village. We pounded it for 3 days. It wouldn't fall. A mustachioed gun commander says doubtfully. Because you pounded areas, Sokolov cuts him off. And you should have hit the arch keystone. The keystone. Knock out one stone, the whole wall collapses. Architecture is a science. Destruction is the reverse side of this science. He throws the twig into the fire. Lesson over. Theory must become practice. Tomorrow we go out onto the highway. There will be bridges, viaducts, embankments. Look at them not as scenery. Look at them as problems. Look for weak spots. Think. A shell flies fast, but thought must fly even faster. The tankers begin to disperse, slowly, thoughtfully. Snatches of conversation are heard. Hear that? You gotta hit the corner. And I didn't know about the ricochet off cobblestones. The guy's got a head on him. Talks sense. They go to their machines, but now they look at the world differently. Knowledge has become their extra armor. Sokolov turned the chaotic horror of war into understandable, albeit complex, work. He gave them a tool of control over the situation. Sokolov's own crew approaches him. The gunner looks at the commander with undisguised pride. Now he is not just a shooter. He is an assistant chief demolition engineer. Sleep, commands Sokolov. Tomorrow wake up at 0400. Check the ammo rack. Take HE above the norm. Armor piercing. Only for emergencies. Yes, Commander, they answer in unison, almost cheerfully.
Sokolov climbs onto the transmission, unfolds an oily, quilted jacket. Heat from the engine breaks through the cotton wool. He closes his eyes. Before his inner gaze, there are not terrible pictures of battle, not corpses, and not fire. Before his eyes float blueprints, stress diagrams, node schematics. He doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a teacher in a survival school, where an F in the gradebook means a zinc coffin. And today, he conducted a good lesson. Today, he armed not only his tank, but the minds of a dozen other crews. And this means that the chances of reaching Berlin have become slightly greater. The survival statistics shifted a fraction of a percent in their favor. And in the world of engineering calculation, even a fraction of a percent matters. The forest rustles with pine tops. Somewhere, far away, in the west, the sky is backlit by the glow of fires. The war does not stop for a minute. But here, in a small camp amidst the swamps, people sleep more calmly.
They know what to do. They know that concrete is also mortal, and German steel bends if the right lever is applied to it. Sokolov falls asleep. In his hand, shoved into a pocket, fingers habitually grip the cold metal of calipers, his personal talisman, an instrument of measurement in a world where everyone is trying to destroy any measures. Night has descended on the front line like a dense, impenetrable curtain. The artillery duel on the horizon has quieted down, as if tired giants have gone to sleep. Silence here, at the front, is never absolute. It is always filled with sounds: the rustle of wind in pine crowns, the distant hum of tractors, the crackle of cooling motors, the snoring of sleeping soldiers. But after the hellish roar of battle, this relative silence seems cottony, deafening. It presses on the ears harder than the explosion of a high-explosive shell. Lieutenant Sokolov is not sleeping. He sits in a shallow dugout, dug 3 logs deep. Above, logs and half a meter of earth, reliable protection against a stray fragment. Inside, it smells of dampness, earthy mold, and acrid burning. The light source is a homemade lamp made from a flattened 45mm shell casing. The wick, immersed in diesel, smokes, throwing black flakes of soot into the air, but gives a small, trembling tongue of yellow flame. On Sokolov's knees is a map case. On the map case is a sheet of gray, coarse paper. In his right hand is a pencil. The lead is dull, but he has no strength to sharpen it. He is writing a letter. "Hello, Mom. Hello, Father. Writing to you from a halt. I am doing well, alive, healthy, fed well. The weather is warm, summer-like." The pencil freezes. Sokolov looks at the dancing flame of the lamp. What else to write? Write that today he crushed 5 people with a concrete slab? Write that only a wet spot mixed with oil remained of the German crew? Write that his hands are still trembling from tension, and the screech of breaking steel stands in his ears? No. They don't need to know this. The rear must sleep peacefully. The rear must believe that war is work, not a slaughterhouse. Parents need a simple lie. Everything is normal. They don't need the complex truth about the resistance of materials and the breaking point of the human body. "We are taking care of my machine. The crew is good, smart guys. We are currently in the forests. The places here are beautiful, somewhat similar to ours, near Moscow." He lies. The places here are terrible. The forest is ploughed by craters. Trees stand without tops, as if lopped off by a giant scythe. The swamps are stuffed with mines and rotting bodies that there is no time to bury. But paper will endure anything. Paper is also a construction material, only for building illusions.
Sokolov puts down the pencil. The letter is short, just a few lines. There are no more words.
Emotions burned out along with the gunpowder in the casings. Only fatigue and a dull, aching pain in the temples remain. He carefully folds the sheet into a triangle. Field post address. Name. Everything clear, according to regulations. His hand reaches for the breast pocket of his tunic. There, next to his party card and photograph, lies an object that has no relation to war. Sokolov takes it out. The metal chills his fingers. Calipers. A tool from a past life. Heavy, chrome-plated, made conscientiously before the war. There isn't a speck of rust on it. Sokolov guards it more closely than his service TT pistol. The pistol is a tool of death. The calipers are a tool of truth. A tool of creation. He brings the tool to the light of the lamp. The vernier scale gleams. Tenths of a millimeter. Precision. In a world where everything is measured in kilometers of front and tons of TNT, this precision seems like something holy. Sokolov slides the frame. The fine adjustment wheel rotates softly, with a barely audible rustle. Perfect fit of parts. No play. Harmony of mechanics. The lieutenant looks at his hands. Rough, with blackness ingrained into the skin, with broken nails, with bruised knuckles. Hands of a killer. Hands of a destroyer. Yet these hands learned to hold a ruling pen, learned to draw diagrams, learned to calculate railway bridge trusses. I learned to build, thinks Sokolov, looking at the sharp jaws of the calipers. I learned to create what should stand for centuries. Bridges connecting shores, factories giving work, houses giving warmth. My diploma project was an arch bridge across the Volga. Load calculation, wind pressure, thermal expansion, a beautiful, lace-like structure. And now he uses this knowledge inside out. He calculates not how to build, but how to break. He looks not for strength, but for weakness. He looks at a building and sees not architecture, but a collapse diagram. He looks at a bridge and estimates where to place a charge so the span falls into the water most effectively. His brain, sharpened for creation, turned into a perfect mechanism of destruction. The engineer became a sapper in reverse. This is a professional tragedy that newspapers don't write about. An architect who became an executioner of cities. Sokolov measures the thickness of a matchbox. 14.2 millimeters. A meaningless action, but it calms. It returns a sense of control. As long as he can measure the world with accuracy to tenths, he remains a human. He remains an engineer, and not just cannon fodder in an iron box. Outside, somewhere very far away, a heavy howitzer booms. The earth in the dugout barely noticeably shudders. A thin stream of sand pours from the ceiling, falling onto the letter sheet. When all this ends, the thought comes by itself, quiet and timid. When we finish off the beast, I will return. I will enter graduate school. I will forget the ballistics of an armor-piercing shell. I will calculate beams for bending. I will build. I will build a house that won't fall apart even if you shoot at it with a cannon. This is a dream. Distant, almost unreal. Right now, thousands of kilometers of fire and concrete lie between him and it. Between him and it, Berlin, Warsaw, Königsberg, fortress cities. Cities that he will have to turn into ruins to survive. So that these triangular letters reach the addressees. The paradox of war. To build in the future, one must destroy in the present. To preserve life, one must become a master of death.
He turns the wheel of the calipers again. Forward, back, forward, back. Meditation of a technocrat. This little device is his anchor. It reminds him that the world consists not only of chaos and mud, that laws of physics exist which are immutable, that order exists.
And if he, Lieutenant Sokolov, could use these laws to win today, it means reason is still stronger than madness. Sokolov sighs, heavily, with a wheeze in his chest. He hides the calipers back in his pocket, closer to the heart. Let it lie there. Let it warm up. This is his connection to normal life, where people wear suits, not coveralls, and hold slide rules in their hands, not tank control levers. He blows out the lamp. The dugout plunges into total darkness. The smell of burning intensifies. Now only his own breathing and the pounding of blood in his ears are audible. Tomorrow is battle again. Tomorrow again looking for vulnerabilities, calculating angles, estimating ricochets. Tomorrow again turning beautiful European architecture into piles of broken brick. This is his job. Heavy, dirty, necessary work. Sleep, engineer, he says to himself in the dark. Bridges will wait. First, we need to clear the site. He closes his eyes, but sleep doesn't come. Before his eyes, the falling slab still stands. And numbers. Endless columns of numbers, formulas, vectors. War has settled in his head, occupying the place reserved for bridge blueprints. But he knows. One day, he will kick it out of there. He will take drawing paper, take his calipers, and draw the first line of a new world. A world where concrete is needed for life, not for death. And for now, silence. Fragile, anxious, front-line silence before dawn. The letter lies on the table, ready to go to the rear. A triangle of hope, folded by the dirty hands of a destroyer who dreams of becoming a builder. Decades have passed. Time is the most ruthless abrasive. It erases cities, names, and metal, turning the sharp pain of memory into smooth, cold history. We are in a different world. It is quiet here. There is no smell of burning and decomposition, no scream of ricochets and strained roar of diesels. Here, it smells of mown lawn, heated granite, and city dust. Memorial complex. A huge square, paved with concrete slabs. This is not the concrete that crumbled under shells in '44. This is ceremonial, polished concrete, created for eternity, not for war. On a pedestal, frozen in an eternal dash, stands a T-34. Its armor is covered with layers of fresh green paint. Tracks are welded tight to steel channels. Hatches are welded shut. It is no longer a combat machine. It is a symbol. It is a mock-up of itself, stripped of internal mechanics, stripped of crew, stripped of life. Tourists walk by, sliding indifferent glances along the sloped armor. For them, this is just a monument, an artifact of an ancient era, like a Roman legionary's sword or a flintlock musket. At the foot of the tank stands an old man. He leans on a cane, but his back is straight. Old age has dried out his body, turning muscles into wiry cords, but could not extinguish his gaze. Eyes under thick gray eyebrows look at the tank not as a monument. They look tenaciously, professionally, appraisingly. He sees not green paint, but rough wartime weld seams made by teenagers at Ural factories. He sees dents on the road wheels. He sees a chip on the gun mantlet, a trace from shrapnel that could have killed, but only scratched the steel.
This is Sokolov, the engineer who survived, the builder who returned to creation. His hands, resting on the head of the cane, are covered with age spots and a web of wrinkles, but they are the same hands that once held control levers and drew collapse diagrams on a dirty map case. Next to him, jumping with impatience, spins a boy of about 7, grandson. He is wearing a bright jacket, holding a smartphone. For him, this tank is a huge, cool toy from a computer game. He doesn't feel the cold of death emanating from the metal. He sees only the form. "Grandpa! Hey, Grandpa!" The boy's ringing voice cuts the silence of the memorial. "Is this your tank?"
Did you drive one like this?
Sokolov slowly turns his head. "One like this." His voice is hollow, creaky, like an ungreased hinge. "Only that one was dirtier and louder." The boy runs to the granite parapet, reaches his hand to the track. The metal is cold, rough. "Grandpa, were you a hero?" he asks, turning around, eyes burning with curiosity. "Did you kill many fascists? Pashka from 2B says his great-grandfather killed 100 people. And you?" The old man chuckles. A bitter, barely noticeable smile touches the corners of his lips. The child's question is simple and cruel. In the child's world, war is a shooting competition where the one with more frags wins. How to explain to this boy, living in a world of plastic and the internet, what real war is? How to explain that killing is not a goal, but a heavy, dirty necessity? How to tell about the smell of burnt meat, about the crunch of bones under tracks, about the mathematics of survival? Sokolov approaches closer.
He puts a hand on his grandson's shoulder. The palm is heavy, warm. "I wasn't a killer, grandson," he says, quietly but firmly. "I was an engineer." "An engineer?" The boy draws out the word disappointedly. "Like Dad? But engineers sit in offices and count. And in war, you have to shoot." "In war, little one, first of all, you have to think." Sokolov taps his cane on the concrete slab. The sound is dry, crisp. "Any fool knows how to shoot. Pressed a button and it flew. But to hit in such a way that one shell saves 100 lives, that is work for the head. We just counted well. We counted angles, counted seconds, counted strength." He looks at the tank. That day floats up in his memory. June, swamp, workshop ruins. The Jagd Panther crushed by a concrete slab. He didn't fire at it a single time to kill the crew. He fired at the structure. He won not with malice, but with knowledge.
"See this machine," continues the grandfather, pointing with his cane at the 85mm gun. "This is a hammer, a big, heavy hammer. But without a smart head, a hammer can only smash fingers. We were the ones who knew where to strike." The boy falls silent, digesting what he heard. It is difficult for him to understand. Heroism in his understanding is burning eyes and a banner in hands. And grandfather talks about some calculations. "Was it scary?" he asks, quieter now. Sokolov looks into the distance, over the park trees. "It was," he answers honestly. "It's scary when you don't know the solution to the problem. When an equation is before you, and in the answer, death. But when you find the solution, fear goes away. Only work remains." People pass by. Young couples with strollers, noisy groups of teenagers on skateboards, women with bags. Life goes on as usual. They laugh, argue,
talk on the phone. They don't think about the fact that under their feet is concrete, not swamp. They don't think about the fact that this peaceful day is paid for by the precise engineering calculation of millions like Sokolov. The old man looks at them. This is his main monument. Not granite steles, not bronze reeds, not this tank on a pedestal. The monument is them, living people, descendants of those 200 soldiers who ran along the open road past the crushed self-propelled gun back then. Children of those whom he carried out on the armor to the medical battalion. Grandchildren of those who didn't burn in that bottleneck, because Lieutenant Sokolov remembered a lecture on strength of materials. A genealogical tree of life that wasn't chopped down at the root, but continued to grow. In every stroller that a young mother pushes lies the result of that battle. In every laugh of a student sounds the echo of that shot at the column. This is the logistics of a nation's survival.
Let's go, Grandpa.
The boy pulls him by the sleeve.
Mom promised ice cream.
Sokolov nods. He casts a last glance at the T-34. Sleep peacefully, Ion, he thinks. You've done your work. We've done our work. Now it's their turn. He shifts his gaze to his grandson. In this little person is the future. Maybe he will also become an engineer. Will build spaceships or new cities. The main thing is that he doesn't have to calculate how to destroy old ones. Let's go, says Sokolov. They walk away down the alley, old man and child, past and future. The camera slowly rises up, leaving them as small figures against the background of the huge memorial. The view from a bird's-eye view encompasses the park, city blocks, roads jammed with cars, concrete boxes of houses, bridges thrown across rivers, factory chimneys. All of this stands. All of this works. A huge, complex engineering structure called peaceful life. It is held up not by magic, it is held up by a foundation poured with blood and sweat. It is held up by the fact that once, in the most terrible hour of history, the Russian mind turned out to be harder than German concrete. And as long as this mind is alive, as long as this spark is passed on, from grandfather to grandson, from master to apprentice, the structure will stand.